The day my husband's motorcycle disappeared, I thought grief couldn't hurt me anymore. But I was wrong. I was standing in my kitchen with a cup of coffee gone cold when I saw the empty space in the garage through the window. For a second, I couldn't breathe. That spot right there under the flickering bulb had been where Daniel's Triumph stood for 20 years. It wasn't just a bike. It was him. His smell, his hands, his laughter after every long ride, and now it was gone. I didn't need to guess who took it. My son had been talking about that bike for months. "It's just collecting dust, Mom," he'd said. "You could sell it and fix the roof, or finally take that cruise you talk about." But I never agreed. That motorcycle was all I had left of Daniel, and David knew it. So when I saw the garage door wide open and the oil stain on the floor glistening like a wound, I knew exactly what he'd done. The phone rang before I could even cry. A voice on the other end, rough and hesitant, said, "Mrs. Williams, this is Tom. I'm a mechanic over at Redline Garage. I think I've got something that belonged to your husband." At first I thought he meant the motorcycle itself. Maybe David had changed his mind. Maybe it wasn't too late. "Do you mean the Triumph?" I asked. There was a pause. "No, ma'am," Tom said softly. "Your son sold it to me this morning, but when I checked the fuel tank, I found something inside, a little metal box. It's got your name on it, and a note that says, 'Give this to Anna only if I'm gone.'" My knees almost gave out. I had to grab the counter to keep from falling. "My husband's name was Daniel," I whispered. "I know," he said. "I think he left this for you. You might want to come by." I drove there in my old sedan with my heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. Every mile between me and that garage felt like walking backward through time. Daniel's death had been declared an accident. His bike skidded off a wet road 5 years ago late at night, coming back from a friend's place. They said he must have hit a patch of oil, lost control, and went down. No witnesses. I buried him believing that. I spent 5 years believing that. When I got to Redline, the mechanic was waiting at the door. He was in his late 50s, hands covered in grease eyes, kind but wary. He held a small rusted metal box the size of a lunch container. It was wedged inside the gas tank, he said. Perfectly sealed. I almost missed it. I took it with both hands. It was heavier than I expected. My name was carved on the lid, Anna in Daniel's handwriting. My throat closed. Tom said whatever's in there, he wanted you to have it. "Do you want me to stay?" I shook my head. "No, this is between me and him." He nodded and stepped away. I sat on the cold concrete floor right there in the garage, the box trembling in my lap. My fingers struggled with the latch. When it finally gave, the smell of old metal filled the air. Inside was a folded letter yellowed around the edges and a small flash drive wrapped in electrical tape. The letter began with Daniel's handwriting, steady, deliberate, just like the way he used to write me. Grocery lists when we were newly married. "Anna, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I'm gone, it's not by chance. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth while I could still look you in the eyes. The night of the crash wasn't an accident. I took the blame for something I didn't do to protect someone I thought was my friend." The words blurred as tears welled up. I read on. "His name is Mark. You know him. I trusted him with everything. But that night he was drunk. He hit a man on the road and panicked. I showed up just minutes later, found the wreck, and made a decision that's haunted me every day since. I told the police I was driving. He begged me to take the blame, said he'd fix everything, that he couldn't go to prison. I believed him. I thought it was the right thing. I thought I could live with it. I was wrong. My hands shook so violently the paper rattled. Daniel had carried that burden alone. He'd gone to his death with that secret, and now it was in my hands. The letter continued. "Mark promised to stay away, but if he ever comes back, he's coming for David. I left evidence in case it happens. The truth is on the flash drive. Don't trust him. Protect our son even if he hates you for it." My pulse roared in my ears. Mark. The same Mark who had shown up last month, all smiles, saying he wanted to invest in David's new business. The same man who'd been at our house, drinking coffee like nothing had happened. I stared at Daniel's words, feeling my stomach twist into knots. The man my husband died protecting was sitting in my living room last week laughing with my son. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. All I could do was whisper, "What did you do, Daniel?" Tom came back quietly. "You okay, ma'am?" I folded the letter, hiding the shaking in my hands. Did my son know anything about this? He looked uncomfortable. No. He just wanted the money. Said he was in a hurry. Mentioned something about a business partner waiting for him. My blood ran cold. His name wouldn't happen to be Mark, would it? Tom frowned. Yeah, how do you know? The world tilted. My dead husband's secret, my son's blind trust, and a friend who should have been buried with the past all colliding in one awful, inevitable circle. I clutched the metal box to my chest, the cold of it sinking through my sweater. Daniel's words burned in my mind. Protect our son, even if he hates you for it. I looked at Tom and said, he's not just back, he's already here. He stared at me confused. Who? The man my husband died for, I said, and he's sitting across from my son right now. I stood up, my voice trembling but firm. If Daniel wanted me to protect David, then I will. But I'm starting to think the only way to save my son is to finish what my husband started. I walked out of that garage into the afternoon light that felt colder than winter. My hands smelled like grease and ghosts. Somewhere inside my purse, the flash drive clicked softly against my keys, a small, hard promise that the truth was waiting. And I couldn't help but wonder what kind of truth destroys one life but saves another. Tell me, would you open that box if you were me? Comment 1. If you'd face the truth or hit, like if you'd rather never know. I drove home, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Every traffic light felt too long, every sound too loud. My thoughts spun in circles around one fact: my son had sold the motorcycle for money, and that money came from the same man my husband died protecting. I wanted to believe it was just coincidence, but deep down I knew better. When I pulled into the driveway, David's car was already there. I could see him through the kitchen window, sitting at the table with his laptop open. His wife Claire stood beside him, her posture perfect, her voice low but sharp, the way people speak when they think no one's listening. I didn't storm in. I just opened the door quietly and stood there for a moment. They didn't notice me at first. Claire's voice carried across the room. Mark said he needs the deposit tonight. If we don't transfer it, he'll pull out of the deal. David rubbed his forehead. I told you the money's coming tomorrow once the garage clears the sale. It's Dad's old bike, Claire. No one's going to pay more than a few thousand for that. I stepped forward, letting the door close behind me. Actually, I said someone already did. Both of them jumped. David turned, startled. Mom, I thought you were out running errands. I replied. At Redline Garage. Claire crossed her arms, her face tightening. You went there, why? I ignored her. My eyes were locked on my son. David, did you really sell your father's motorcycle without telling me? He looked away, guilt flickering across his face. Mom, please don't make this a big deal. It was just sitting there. You never even started anymore. That's because every time I hear that engine, I said softly, it sounds like your father's still alive. The room fell silent. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. David sighed and pushed his chair back. Mom, we needed the money. I'm trying to build something here. Mark's giving us a chance to invest in his new logistics company. It's a real opportunity. The name hit me like a slap. Mark, I repeated. Claire smiled too quickly. Yes, Mark Evans. You remember him, don't you? He and your husband were old friends. He's been a great help to us lately. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. A great help, my voice cracked. You think the man who destroyed your father's life is a help. David frowned, confused. What are you talking about? I looked at him, my only son, grown, but still somehow that boy who used to beg for one more story before bed, and realized he had no idea. Daniel's secret had buried itself so deep that it reached across generations. I took a breath, steadying my voice. That night your father died, Mark was there. Claire rolled her eyes. This again, Daniel's accident was years ago. Mark told us how hard it was for him. He was devastated. Devastated, I whispered. He should have been in prison. David's expression hardened. Mom, stop. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do, they said, pulling the metal box from my bag and setting it on the table between us. The sound of it hitting the wood echoed through the kitchen. Your father left me this. Hidden inside the gas tank of that motorcycle you just sold. Do you know what it says? David stared at the box as if it might explode. What do you mean, hidden? Exactly what it sounds like, I said. He left me a letter. He confessed the truth about that night and about Mark. Claire laughed nervously, trying to mask the fear in her eyes. That's ridiculous. Why would your husband hide something like that? Probably just sentimental nonsense. Does this look sentimental to you? I snapped, holding up the letter. The paper trembled between my fingers. He said Mark was the one who caused the crash, that he took the blame to protect him. And now that same man has his hands on my son's future. David's face went pale. That's impossible. Mark's been like family. He invested in my business, he helped us get a loan. I cut him off, and now he owns you. He took a step back, shaking his head. No, he's not like that. He's helped me, Mom. He believes in me. He believed in your father, too, I said quietly. And it cost him his life. For a long moment, no one spoke. Claire finally broke the silence. Anna, you're grieving. You've been alone too long. Maybe this letter, whatever it says, isn't real. Maybe you just want someone to blame. I turned to her. Do you think I can't tell my husband's handwriting from a fake? Her lips tightened. People forge things all the time. Something inside me snapped. I slammed the letter onto the table. You think I don't want to be wrong. You think I want to believe the man who sat in my living room drinking my coffee is the same man who killed my husband. Claire stepped back, startled by my tone. David just stared at the letter like it might swallow him whole. Finally, he said, "Let me read it." I hesitated. The urge to protect him clashed with the need to show him the truth. Slowly, I handed him the page. He read in silence, eyes moving across each line. When he reached the end, he looked at me as if he didn't recognize me anymore. Dad wrote this. I nodded. He exhaled shakily and sank into the chair. So what are you saying that Mark, what used Dad's death to, what help us? I'm saying he never stopped using this family, I said. He used your father's loyalty, now he's using your desperation. Claire tried to interject, but David raised a hand to stop her. His voice was quieter now, uncertain. Even if this is true, why now? Why give this to you after all these years? Because he knew Mark would come back, I said, and he knew you'd trust him. David buried his face in his hands. Jesus Christ. Claire looked between us, her face unreadable. Then she said too calmly, if this is real, what do you plan to do? Go to the police. Destroy everything we've built. I stared at her. You mean what he's built for you? Because that's all this is, isn't it? You wanted the money and you didn't care where it came from. Her smile froze. You're overreacting. David stood abruptly. Stop it, both of you. He turned to me, eyes red. Mom, I can't deal with this right now. I'll talk to Mark myself tomorrow. No, I said sharply. You'll do nothing until I've seen what's on that flash drive your father left. He frowned. Flash drive? I nodded. Proof. And if it says what I think it does, then Mark isn't your business partner. He's your father's unfinished enemy. He opened his mouth to argue, but the look on my face stopped him. Finally, he just said, fine. Do what you need to do. When he and Claire left the kitchen, I sank into the chair they'd just vacated. The house felt colder than it ever had. The letter lay open on the table like a wound that wouldn't close. I stared at Daniel's handwriting and whispered, I'm doing what you asked. Love. I'm protecting him. But God help me. I don't know how far this goes. By morning, I hadn't slept a minute. The letter sat on the kitchen table all night, illuminated by the weak glow of the streetlight outside. Every time I tried to close my eyes, Daniel's words replayed in my head, Mark's name like a drumbeat I couldn't silence. Around dawn, I made a decision. I needed to see Tom again. When I arrived at Red Line Garage, the place was quiet except for the low hum of a radio somewhere in the back. Tom was under a car, half his body hidden. He slid out when he saw me wiping his hands on a rag. You didn't look like you'd be sleeping last night, he said gently. I didn't, I admitted. I need to ask you something about my husband. Tom nodded toward his office. Come inside. It's warmer there. The office smelled of motor oil and coffee that had been reheated one too many times. He poured me a cup anyway. You said Daniel left that box for you. Did you read what was inside? Yes. My voice was steadier than I felt. He said Mark Evans caused the crash, and he left a flash drive. I hesitated. You mentioned he'd been here before he died. How many times? Tom leaned back, thinking. 3 that I know of. The first time he brought the bike in for some routine work, oil change, brake pads, nothing unusual. But the second time, he looked different, nervous. Said he needed a small compartment welded into the gas tank. I told him it wasn't safe, but he insisted. Paid double. He said it was for something that had to stay hidden. I listened the sound of my heartbeat loud in my ears. Did he say why? No, Tom said. But a few days later, he came back one last time. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He gave me a flash drive, maybe the same one you have, and asked if I could copy it for him, said it contained evidence and that if anything happened to him, his wife should know. My hands went cold. Did you copy it? He nodded. Yeah. I still have it locked up. I didn't know if I should destroy it or give it to you. Until yesterday, I figured it was just some personal thing, but after seeing your name on that box, I think you should have it. He opened a drawer and took out a small plastic bag. Inside was a flash drive identical to the one Daniel had hidden. I stared at it, afraid to touch it. Do you know what's on it? He shook his head. No. But I remember something else. When Daniel dropped it off, he mentioned a payment he couldn't explain, said money had been wired into his account from a company he'd never heard of. He thought Mark might have been behind it. A cold realization hit me, to keep him quiet. Maybe Tom said. He didn't say much else, just that he was thinking about going to the police. Then a week later, I heard about the crash. I took the flash drive from him, my fingers trembling. If Mark paid him off, and then the crash happened right after, that's no coincidence. Tom looked uneasy. Be careful, Anna. If this is what I think it is, you're dealing with something dangerous. Mark's not just some old friend, he's someone who knows how to cover his tracks. I thought of David sitting at the table last night defending that man. He's already gotten to my son. I can't let him take anything else. Tom hesitated. Do you want me to look at the files for you? No, I said quickly. If Daniel meant for me to see this, I need to face it myself. I thanked him and left the flash drive burning a hole in my pocket. Outside, the morning sky was gray and heavy. I drove to the library instead of home, neutral ground somewhere Mark's shadow couldn't reach. In the corner computer station, I plugged in the drive. It took a moment to load. Inside was a single folder labeled Truth. My hand shook as I double-clicked. There were 3 video files, a few photos, and a document labeled statement.pdf. I opened the statement first. Daniel's words appeared on screen dated 2 weeks before his death. If you're reading this, I've decided to stop lying. Mark Evans was driving the company truck the night of the accident. He was intoxicated. We argued about it earlier that evening. He said he could handle himself. When I found the wreck, I saw the man on the road already dead. Mark begged me to take the blame. He said his business would collapse, that his wife would leave him. I agreed to say I was the driver. I thought the truth wouldn't matter anymore, but now it's eating me alive. I covered my mouth, reading faster. Mark's company is still operating under a new name, Evancorp Logistics. He used insurance money from the accident to rebuild, and he's been laundering money through shell accounts ever since. He told me if I talked, he'd destroy everything I love. If he's still out there, Anna, promise me you'll protect David. My vision blurred. I scrolled down to the photos, bank statements, transaction screenshots, a picture of Mark at a construction site with a group of men. In the corner of one image was David, barely visible, shaking his hand. A chill swept through me. The pieces fit too perfectly. Mark hadn't just returned, he'd been planning this for years. Then I opened the first video file. It was shaky footage from a security camera. I could barely make out the shape's headlights rained 2 vehicles on a rural road. One swerved, hit something, and stopped. The second, a motorcycle, arrived moments later. A man got off running toward the wreck. Daniel's voice came faintly through the static. Oh God, Mark, what did you do? The screen froze there, Daniel kneeling beside the body. I shut the laptop, breathing hard. My husband had spent the last night of his life trying to save a man who didn't deserve it. When I got back home, the house was quiet. David had already gone to work. Claire was in the living room scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up when I walked in. Rough night, she asked lightly. I ignored her and went straight to my husband's office. Everything was just as he'd left it. The old desk, the framed photo of us from our honeymoon, the faint smell of tobacco that never quite faded. I sat down, staring at the picture. You knew I'd find this, I whispered. You wanted me to. A soft knock came at the door. Claire stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Mark called, she said. He wants to meet David later today. Something about finalizing the investment paperwork. I felt my stomach twist. Where? At his office downtown. Tell David not to go, I said immediately. She frowned. Why, he's expecting him. It's business. Because it's not business, it's a trap. Her expression hardened. You've really lost it, haven't you? Mark's done nothing but help us. You're jealous because he treats David like the son you smothered. The words hit like a slap. Jealous, I said quietly. You have no idea what that man's done. She shrugged her voice, dripping with contempt. You're living in the past, Anna. Daniel's gone. You should let go too. When she walked away, I felt something inside me shift. Not just anger, but clarity. Daniel had trusted the wrong man. I wouldn't make the same mistake. I printed out the statement from the flash drive, tucked it into my purse, and dialed David's number. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. My hands began to shake. If Mark had already arranged this meeting, there was no telling what he might do to keep his secret buried. Then my phone buzzed a message from David heading downtown now. Mark wants to celebrate the deal. Don't wait up. I stared at the words until they blurred. The flash drive, the videos, the confession, none of it would matter if Mark got to my son first. I grabbed my keys, my heart hammering in my chest. The last thing Daniel ever wrote to me echoed in my head like a prayer and a warning. Protect our son, even if he hates you for it. I intended to do exactly that. The city felt unfamiliar as I drove through it, every street blurred by a mix of fear and adrenaline. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I could see Daniel's handwriting in my mind like a ghost whispering, "He'll come for David." That warning wasn't just about the past, it was happening now. Mark's office was in a glass building downtown, a place that looked far too expensive for an honest business. The sign outside read Evan Corp Logistics, just like the company name Daniel had mentioned in his statement. I parked across the street, heart pounding, and spotted David's car already there. He was inside. I got out and crossed the road, pulling my coat tight around me as the wind sliced through the air. The lobby was cold and sterile, the kind of place that smelled like polish and control. Behind the front desk, a young receptionist looked up from her computer. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm here to see Mark Evans. It's urgent." She smiled politely, the kind of smile that meant you're not getting past me. "Mr. Evans is in a meeting." With my son, I said, "Tell him his friend Daniel's wife is here. He'll understand." The receptionist blinked, unsure what to do. Before she could respond, I heard a voice behind me. Smooth, confident, familiar. Anna. I turned. Mark Evans stood at the end of the hallway, hands in his pockets. That same effortless charm he'd always carried like armor. Time hadn't changed him much. His hair was silver now, but his eyes were still that cold shade of gray that never showed anything real. "Long time," he said, walking closer. "You look exactly the same." I forced a smile that wasn't real. "You don't." He chuckled softly. "Well, age comes for all of us, except you, apparently. What brings you here?" "You know why," I said. "Where's my son?" He tilted his head toward the glass conference room down the hall. Through it, I could see David sitting at a large table, stacks of papers spread before him. He looked relaxed, laughing at something Mark's assistant said. "He's in good hands," Mark said. "We're finalizing some paperwork. You should be proud he's smart-driven, just like Daniel was." "Don't you dare say his name," I snapped before I could stop myself. Mark raised his brows, amused, still fiery. "That's good to see." I took a step closer. "You told him to sell the motorcycle." His smile didn't waver. He mentioned he needed capital. I suggested it. Why was that sentimental? "It was sacred," I hissed. "You knew what it meant to Daniel. You knew it would bring me to you." Mark's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe even satisfaction. "You always were quick, Anna." "So it's true," I said quietly. "You caused the crash." His smile vanished. "Careful what you accuse people of. It's been a long time." "I have proof," I said. "A video, Daniel's confession, everything." That made him pause. The faint twitch in his jaw told me I'd hit the mark. "And where did you find that?" "Where he hid it, in the bike." For a brief second, his mask slipped. He looked older, colder, the kind of man who'd learned to lie so long he forgot what truth felt like. I warned him not to keep anything, he murmured. Then he smiled again, smoother this time. "He must have trusted you with a lot." "He trusted you too," I said, "and it killed him." Mark's eyes hardened. "You think you know everything, but you don't." Daniel was a good man, but he wasn't innocent. That night, he could have walked away. He chose not to. "He chose to protect you," I said. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. And now you're choosing to destroy your son's future by digging into the past. I stared at him. You're using him. I'm helping him, Mark said smoothly. I gave him alone business connections a real chance. You think that bakery job of his was going to pay off your house? You should thank me. My chest tightened. You don't care about him. You're just cleaning your hands with my family. He smiled faintly. The past can't hurt anyone unless someone drags it back into the light. Maybe it's time to leave the dead where they belong. The words made something inside me snap. You already buried one man. You won't bury another. He smirked. We'll see. David emerged from the conference room just then, smiling, completely unaware of the war happening 10 feet away. Mom, what are you doing here? Stopping you, I said. Mark stepped aside, pretending politeness. We were just finishing up. Your mother was worried about you. David looked between us. Why, what's going on? I held his gaze. We need to leave, now. Mom, please, he said, embarrassed. This is important. Mark's helping me secure investors. Investors, I repeated. Is that what he told you? That he's doing this out of kindness? David frowned. What's wrong with you? You've been acting paranoid ever since Dad died. The words cut deep. I took a breath, forcing calm. David, your father, left me something before he died. Proof that Mark isn't who he says he is. Mark laughed softly, shaking his head. Here we go again, Anna. You really should get help. David turned on me. Mom, stop. You can't come in here and... Your father didn't die in an accident, I said. Mark was behind it. The room went silent. Mark sighed dramatically. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Anna, grief can make people imagine things. Why don't we... Enough, I said sharply. I turned to my son. Daniel left a statement, videos, everything. He took the blame for Mark. And now Mark is using you the same way. David looked stunned, his mouth opening, but no words coming out. That's insane, he finally said. Mark's been nothing but good to us. Mark placed a hand on his shoulder, calm and fatherly. It's okay, son. She's upset. Don't call him that, I snapped. David stepped back, shaking his head. This isn't happening. I don't want to hear any more of this. Then you'll end up like your father, I said quietly. That stopped him cold. Mark's expression darkened. You've said enough, Anna. No. I said, my voice low but steady. I've waited 5 years to say this. I looked at David again. Your father died for the wrong man. Don't make me watch you do the same. David ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. I can't do this right now. I'll talk to you later. He turned to leave, but Mark's hand tightened on his arm. Let him go, I said. Mark smiled politely. He's an adult. He can decide who to listen to. For a moment, I thought David would pull away. Instead, he froze, caught between us, between blood and betrayal. Then quietly, he said, I'll call you tonight, Mom. I watched him walk out with Mark's assistant trailing behind, carrying folders that probably contained the very papers signing his future away. When they disappeared through the lobby doors, I felt the air rush out of me. I sank into a chair, shaking. Mark reappeared a moment later. You shouldn't have come here, he said softly. You've made things worse for him. I looked up at him. You underestimate how far a mother will go. He studied me for a long moment, then leaned in. You think you're fighting me, Anna, but you're really fighting the memory of a man who made his own choices. Daniel covered for me because he wanted to. He was no saint. That's a lie. He shrugged. Believe what you want, but be careful. There are things buried that shouldn't be dug up. You wouldn't want your son caught in the fallout. And just like that, he walked away, calm and certain, leaving me trembling in that sterile glass lobby. Outside, the sky had darkened clouds, heavy with rain. I walked to my car, heart hammering, and sat there, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked older, sharper a stranger's face. Then my phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. You shouldn't have opened that box. Some things are better left buried. I stared at it, every nerve in my body freezing. Mark knew. He knew I had the flash drive. My throat went dry. I started the car and drove home, checking the mirrors every few seconds. No one followed me, but I could feel it, the invisible pressure of being watched. When I got home, the house was dark except for the soft glow from the kitchen. Claire was sitting there, her laptop open, typing quickly. She looked up, startled, when I entered. You're home early, she said, closing the screen too fast. I noticed the faint reflection of a logo before it disappeared, Evancorp. My chest went cold. What were you working on? She smiled too sweetly. Just invoices. Why? I stepped closer. Don't lie to me. Her expression flickered. I'm not. Then tell me why you're working for Mark Evans. The silence that followed told me everything. She tried to recover, but her voice wavered. David needed the money. Mark offered me a position just temporary to help with expenses. You mean to help him control every part of this family, I said. She stood abruptly. You're paranoid, Anna. You're seeing ghosts where there aren't any. Maybe, I said quietly, but ghosts don't send me text messages. Her face went pale. What message? I showed her the phone. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she turned away. That was all the confirmation I needed. Mark wasn't just manipulating David, he had Claire on his payroll. And now I was truly alone. That night I sat in the dark, the house silent except for the sound of rain beating against the windows. The text message still glowed on my phone screen. You shouldn't have opened that box. My thumb hovered over it, trembling. I didn't know if I should call the police or burn the whole thing to ashes, but something in me refused to be afraid anymore. Daniel had lived in silence. I wouldn't. I went to the garage, locked the door behind me, and plugged the flash drive into my old laptop. I needed to see everything. There were 2 more video files I hadn't opened. The first one started with Daniel's face recorded in that same garage years ago. His voice was rough, shaky. Anna, he said, looking directly into the camera. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it back. I kept thinking I could fix it, that I could make Mark stop before it went too far, but I can't. He's laundering money through the company. He's threatened me. He says if I tell anyone, he'll go after David. Please protect him. I paused the video, my heart breaking all over again. His eyes looked tired, older than I remembered, as if the guilt had aged him overnight. The second video was surveillance footage from a warehouse time-stamped 2 nights before Daniel's death. It showed Mark handing a thick envelope to someone I didn't recognize. Then the camera shifted, revealing a license plate, EVC 1123. I wrote it down, every nerve in my body on edge. When the footage ended, I closed the laptop. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing in the smell of motor oil and rain. That license plate felt like a thread I could pull, and if I pulled hard enough, maybe the whole web would come undone. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. Detective Henry Cole had been a friend of Daniel's for years. He'd retired 2 years after the accident, but I still had his number scribbled in an old address book. When I called, he answered on the second ring. Anna, it's been a long time. His voice was warm but cautious. Henry, I need to ask you something about Daniel's case, I said. He hesitated. Anna, that case was closed a long time ago. It was ruled accidental. I was there, remember. Please, I said, trying to steady my voice. Something's wrong. I found evidence Daniel didn't cause that crash. Mark Evans did. Silence. Then quietly, where are you getting this from? He left me a letter videos records, and I have a plate number, EVC 1123 from a warehouse camera 2 nights before he died. I think it's connected. Henry exhaled slowly. All right, send me what you have. But Anna, you need to be careful. If what you're saying is true, you're stepping into something ugly. I already have, I said. I sent him the files and waited, pacing the garage. Every sound outside made me flinch. The rain on the roof, the creak of the wind, the distant sound of a car engine. When my phone finally rang again, Henry's tone had changed. Anna, you were right. That plate belongs to a vehicle registered to one of Mark Evans's shell companies. It's been inactive for years. But here's the thing. Daniel's crash report was edited 3 days after it was filed. Someone changed the driver's statement and the witness list. The signature on the amendment isn't Daniel's. I froze. You mean someone forged his statement? Yes. Whoever did it had access to the system. Can you reopen the case? He hesitated. Not officially. I'm retired. But I can reach out to someone in the department. Just don't do anything risky. If Mark knows you have this evidence, you're in danger. I hung up and looked around the dark garage. The shadows seemed deeper than before, the corners darker. I closed the laptop, tucked it and the flash drive into a metal tin, and slid it behind the old toolbox Daniel used to keep locked. Then I went inside. Claire wasn't in the living room anymore. Her laptop was gone, her coat missing from the rack. The house felt emptier than it had in years. I tried to call David, no answer. Tried again, straight to voicemail. Then I checked the time, 11:47 p.m. Something inside me twisted. He'd gone back to see Mark. I grabbed my keys and ran out into the storm. By the time I reached Mark's neighborhood, the rain had turned into a downpour, the kind that blurred the world into streaks of silver. His mansion sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, all glass and steel, lit like a stage. A black car I recognized David's was parked outside. I pulled over and killed the headlights. My heart thudded in my ears as I watched the front door. Through the windows, I could see silhouettes moving David, pacing Mark seated at a table, and Claire standing near the door, her arms folded. She was there too. I cracked the car door open just enough to hear muffled voices over the rain. David's tone was raised. "You didn't tell me about the money transfer, Mark. Mom found out everything." Mark's voice was calm, practiced. "Your mother is confused. She's been through a lot. She's letting grief turn her into something else." Claire's voice cut in cold. "David, please, don't make this worse." My stomach dropped. She wasn't there by accident. She was part of it. I watched as Mark slid a folder across the table. "This will fix everything. Sign it and the business will be yours in name. You'll own it all. Your mother won't have to worry again." David looked at the papers, confused. "Why do I need to sign over the house?" "It's just collateral," Mark said smoothly. "Standard procedure. Collateral." My blood ran cold. He was taking everything, our home, our last connection to Daniel. I stepped out of the car into the rain, heart pounding, and ran to the porch. The front door was slightly ajar, as if someone had forgotten to close it. I didn't knock. I pushed it open and walked in. David looked up, shocked. "Mom, what the hell are you doing here?" Mark stood, his face composed. "Anna, you really do have a talent for showing up uninvited." I ignored him and turned to David. "Don't sign those papers." Claire's eyes widened. "How did you—" "Because I know exactly what he's doing," I said. I looked at Mark. "You think I wouldn't recognize the same kind of document Daniel signed the night he died?" David's hand froze over the pen. "What are you talking about?" "Your father signed a statement to protect Mark, and it cost him his life," I said. "Now he's making you sign something else to take what's left of this family." Mark laughed softly. "You really should stop reading conspiracy blogs, Anna." "Then explain the altered crash report," I said. "Explain the plate number. Explain the videos your friend Daniel recorded before he died." His eyes flickered. That was all the proof I needed. David looked between us, uncertainty twisting his face. "What videos?" "Proof," I said. "I gave it to someone who won't let it disappear." That was a lie. Henry hadn't promised anything yet, but Mark didn't need to know. Mark's expression darkened. "You don't know what you're doing." "Neither did my husband," I said. "He thought protecting you would keep us safe." I turned to David. "Look at me, son. Do you trust him more than you trust your own father?" David's jaw clenched. I don't know anymore." "Then trust me," I said. The rain outside thundered against the glass. Mark stepped closer, his calm demeanor cracking. "You've always been dramatic, Anna. That's what Daniel said about you too emotional to handle the truth." I met his eyes. "The truth is all I have left." For a moment, no one moved. Then David pushed the folder away. "I'm not signing anything until I talk to my lawyer." Mark's face hardened. "That's a mistake." Maybe David said quietly, but it's mine to make. Mark's hand tightened on the back of the chair, knuckles white. For a heartbeat, I thought he might hit him. Then he smiled again, cold and hollow. "Fine. Take your time. But opportunities don't last forever." I took David's arm. "We're leaving." As we walked out into the rain, Mark's voice followed us. "Be careful driving home, Anna. Accidents happen." The words hit like a blade. I turned to face him one last time. "Not this time," I said. "If you touch my son, I'll make sure the whole world sees what you did." His smile faded, replaced by something darker, something real. "You think you can stop me?" "I already have," I said. We left. The door slammed behind us, sealing the lie he'd lived behind glass and steel. In the car, David sat, silent rain streaking down the windshield. "Was all of that true?" he finally asked. "Yes," I said. "Your father tried to protect him, and it killed him. I won't let him do the same to you." David stared out at the storm. "Then what now?" I looked at the road ahead. "Now we fight." By morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky stayed gray, the kind of color that felt like waiting. I hadn't slept again. David had crashed on the couch, his face pale and drawn, the exhaustion of betrayal heavy in his eyes. Every time I looked at him, I saw Daniel's shadow. The same jawline, the same stubbornness. But there was something else, too. A fragility that hadn't been there before. At 7, my phone buzzed. It was Henry. "I've gone through everything you sent me," he said without preamble. His voice carried the kind of tone cops used when they were done doubting. "You were right, Anna. The videos are legitimate. The documents match archived police data. Daniel's report was falsified, and the signature on the amended file belongs to an officer named Robert Wade Mark's brother-in-law at the time." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. He had someone inside the department. "Yeah," Henry said, "and if you're thinking of taking this public, you need to be ready. People with that kind of reach don't go down quietly." "I don't care," I said. "He threatened my son." Henry sighed. "I figured you'd say that. I already talked to a contact at the DA's office. They'll need physical copies of everything originals, not digital. If we can prove tampering and financial ties between Mark's company and that old case, we might have a case for conspiracy and fraud." "Then that's what we'll do," I said. "I'll bring everything I have." "Meet me at the old precinct," he said. "Back entrance, 3 p.m. Don't tell anyone where you're going." When I hung up, the quiet of the house pressed down like fog. I turned to find David standing in the doorway, hair disheveled, still in the clothes from last night. "Who was that?" "A friend," I said. "Someone who can help us." He rubbed his face. "Mom, I don't even know what to think anymore. I trusted Mark. I trusted Claire." His voice broke slightly. "And she's been working with him all this time." "Yes," I said softly, "but this isn't over." He let out a bitter laugh. "You really think anyone's going to believe us? Mark's got money lawyers' friends in every corner of this city." I walked to him and took his hands in mine. "Then we'll find people who can't be bought." He didn't look convinced, but he nodded. That was enough. By the time I left the house, I'd hidden copies of Daniel's letter and the flash drive in 3 different places: the bottom of a flower jar in the pantry, the false panel behind the bookshelf, and one inside an envelope addressed to myself at the post office, just in case. The drive to the precinct felt endless. My mind raced with everything Henry had said. Mark had a man inside the police-forged evidence, silenced witnesses. If he could do that, once he could do it again. When I parked near the back entrance, Henry was waiting by the door, a thick folder under his arm. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, but his eyes were still sharp. "Let's get inside," he said. The building was mostly empty, just the skeleton of what used to be a working precinct. In his small office, Henry spread out files across a table. I printed everything from the archives. The night Daniel died, 2 officers were listed at the scene, Wade and a rookie named Carson. Carson's report vanished a week later. And you'll love this. Wade got a promotion 6 months after the case closed. I looked through the papers, the words blurring. So it was all buried. "Exactly," Henry said. "Mark's company donated nearly $50,000 to the police charity fund that same year. It's all connected." I reached into my bag and pulled out the flash drive. Here's the original evidence. Daniel's videos, his written statement, bank transactions, all of it. Henry took it carefully. "This could blow the whole thing open. But once this goes to the DA, there's no turning back. You'll be public. Exposed." "I've been living with ghosts for 5 years," I said. "It's time everyone else meets them, too." He gave a short nod, something like respect in his eyes. "I'll take this to them. But be smart, Anna. If Mark catches wind of what we're doing, he'll come after you first." "Let him try." Henry smiled faintly. "You sound like Daniel." The words hit me in a way I didn't expect. "Good," I said quietly. "Maybe that means I'm finally doing something right." When I got home later that afternoon, the front door was unlocked. My first thought was that David had returned, but when I stepped inside, the house was too still. My gut twisted. I walked into the living room. Claire's laptop was open on the coffee table, the screen frozen on an email draft addressed to Mark. Subject: "She's going to the police today. The files are with Henry Cole." A noise from the kitchen made me spin around. Claire stood there, her face, pale eyes wide. "Anna." I cut her off. "How long have you been spying for him?" "It's not what you think," she said quickly. "Mark, he said he could help us. I just wanted to keep David safe." "By betraying him," I demanded. "By warning the man who killed his father." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You don't understand. Mark has people everywhere. If I didn't tell him, he said he'd ruin David, his business, his credit, everything." "He already has," I said coldly. She shook her head, trembling. He made me record you. The calls, the messages, you have no idea what he's capable of. I stepped closer. Then you're going to help me stop him. Her lip quivered. He won't let me. He doesn't have to let you, I said. You can choose. Before she could answer, my phone buzzed a message from Henry. Meet postponed. DA's contact backed out last minute. I think Mark got to them. Keep your head down. My stomach dropped. Claire saw the look on my face and whispered, He's already moving. I turned to her. Then we moved faster. She looked terrified. Anna, you don't know who you're dealing with. Oh, I do, I said, grabbing my coat. I've known him longer than you've been alive. I walked toward the door, but she caught my arm. If you go after him alone, you'll end up like Daniel. I stopped, looked at her, and said, Then I'll make sure Daniel's death finally means something. Outside, the clouds had turned dark again, the wind carrying the smell of more rain. I got into my car, but before I started the engine, I whispered to the empty seat beside me. You were right, Daniel. The storm's coming. And this time I was ready for it. By the next morning, I had stopped shaking. Grief had burned itself into something sharper resolve. Every corner of the house still smelled faintly of Daniel. His leather jacket hanging on the back of the chair, the faint trace of aftershave that clung to the air no matter how many times I cleaned. But the fear that used to live here was gone. In its place was purpose. I called Mark myself. The line rang 3 times before he answered, his voice smooth, almost amused. Anna, you never give up, do you? I don't, I said. We need to talk alone. He chuckled softly. Talk after everything you've accused me of? I found something you'll want to see, I said, letting my tone drop to a whisper. It's about Daniel. I think you should hear it before anyone else does. A pause, then that careful calm of his returned. Where? Redline Garage, I said. Tonight, 9 o'clock, no lawyers, no assistants, just you and me. He hesitated for the briefest moment. You've always had a flair for the dramatic Anna. Fine, 9 o'clock. I hung up before he could say more. My heart pounded, but my plan was set. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I charged the small voice recorder Henry had given me years ago, the kind that could fit into a pocket without notice. I made copies of every file and locked them in the trunk of my car, leaving only one set in my purse. And then I waited, counting the hours by the sound of the old kitchen clock ticking away the last of my hesitation. At exactly 8:30, I drove to the garage. The night air was cool, heavy with the smell of wet pavement. Tom wasn't there. He'd closed early, just like I'd asked. The entire space was silent, except for the drip of rainwater from the roof and the hum of the fluorescent light over the workbench. I stood in the middle of the concrete floor, the motorcycle's oil stain still visible like a scar. It was fitting. I thought that it would end here. At 9, sharp headlights swept across the open door. Mark's silver car rolled in and stopped just a few feet away. He stepped out wearing a dark suit and that same infuriating half-smile that had fooled everyone for years. Charming as ever, he said, glancing around. You always did like symbolism. The scene of the crime. Something like that, I said. He looked around again, wary. You're alone. Yes. You didn't bring your detective friend. I shook my head. This isn't about him. It's about you and me and Daniel. Mark smiled faintly. Then let's talk. I gestured to the old stool near the workbench. Sit. He hesitated, then did. I stayed standing, the recorder hidden in my coat pocket, already running. You said you found something, he said. What is it? I pulled out a folded paper from my bag and set it on the bench. It wasn't the real letter, just a blank sheet with Daniel's signature photocopied at the bottom. This, I said. Daniel wrote it 2 days before the crash. He leaned forward, pretending indifference, but unable to hide the flicker of unease in his eyes. What's in it? You tell me, I said softly. You were there. He looked up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? You know exactly what it means, I said, stepping closer. He went out that night because of you. He covered for you, and you repaid him with silence. Mark's jaw tightened. You've been digging too deep, Anna. You're building stories out of grief. Then prove me wrong, I said. Tell me he wasn't protecting you. He smirked. What difference would it make? He's dead. You can't rewrite history. I took another step forward. History doesn't need rewriting. It just needs witnesses. For the first time, his composure cracked. What are you doing? I met his gaze. Recording the truth. His eyes flicked toward my coat, realizing too late. "You stupid he!" stood abruptly, fury flashing across his face. "You think anyone will believe you? You think some washed-up widow and a retired cop can take me down?" "I don't need to take you down," I said, voice low and steady. "You already did that yourself. All I have to do is press play." He stared at me, breathing hard. Then suddenly he laughed a dark, hollow sound. "You don't understand how this works. The world doesn't care about truth, Anna. It cares about power, and I have more of it than you can imagine." I held my ground. "You had it until now." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You're not going to ruin me over something that happened 5 years ago." Daniel made his choice. He was weak. My hand clenched at my side. He was loyal. "He was a fool," Mark spat. "He thought if he took the blame, he'd save his family. But all he did was destroy it. You want someone to blame him." The words hit like a knife, but I didn't flinch. "He trusted you," I said. Mark sneered, "and that was his mistake." The silence that followed was electric. The recorder in my pocket was still running, every word etched into memory. I finally said thank you. He frowned. "For what?" "For confessing." His expression shifted from arrogance to sudden dawning fear. "What did you—" I pulled the recorder from my pocket and held it up. The small red light blinked in the dim light. Mark lunged forward, but I stepped back fast, holding the device out of reach. "You touch me," I said, "and this recording hits every newsroom in the state." He froze, breathing hard. Then he straightened, forcing another smile. "You think that little toy is enough to stop me?" "It's not just this," I said. "There are copies, files, videos, bank records, and people who already know." He studied me for a long, tense moment. Then slowly he smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "You're braver than I gave you credit for." "I learned from the best," I said. "Daniel taught me how to fight for something worth losing everything for." Mark's gaze darkened. "This isn't over." "It is," I said. "You just don't know it yet." He stepped past me, heading for the door. "Enjoy your little victory, Anna. You won't get to keep it." "Maybe not," I said, my voice quiet, but sure. "But at least it's real." When he was gone, I stood in the garage for a long time, the silence pressing against my chest. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear, it was adrenaline. I replayed his words in my head. Every cruel syllable burned into the recorder's memory. I took the device out, pressed stop, and whispered, "Got you." Outside, thunder rolled far away, slow and deep, like the earth itself was taking sides. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel like a widow trapped in someone else's story. I felt alive, terrified, yes, but alive. Daniel's voice echoed in my mind, calm and steady, the way he always sounded before a storm. "Protect our son even if he hates you for it." I looked at the empty garage, the oil stain glistening beneath the fluorescent light, and said aloud I did Daniel. I finally did. By sunrise, I wasn't Anna the widow anymore. I was Anna Williams, the woman who held a confession that could burn down a kingdom built on lies. The sky outside my kitchen window was pale gold, the kind of morning that looks peaceful only if you don't know what's coming. I made coffee with hands that didn't shake for the first time in days. The small recorder sat in front of me on the table like a live grenade. The red light had stopped blinking hours ago, but what it carried inside was still pulsing with power. At 9, Henry called. "You did it," he said, his voice low, careful. "I've listened to the recording. He confessed to everything: Daniel's death, the cover-up, the forged report. We have him." I closed my eyes, breathing in relief so sharp it almost hurt. "Then let's make it public." "Already in motion," Henry said. "The DA's office wants a joint statement. We'll meet at the courthouse in 2 hours. Bring your son. He deserves to see this." When I hung up, I turned toward the living room. David was sitting there awake but hollow-eyed, clutching a mug he hadn't touched. "Was that the detective?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "It's happening today." He looked down at the floor. "I keep thinking about Dad. How much he must have carried. How long he stayed quiet." "He thought silence was protection," I said softly. "We know better now." By 11, the courthouse steps were swarming with reporters, microphones, and cameras. The air buzzed with the electric tension of a story about to break. Henry met us by the doors, a file tucked under his arm. His gray suit looked pressed, but his eyes were tired. "Once this goes out," he said, "there's no turning back." "I don't want to turn back," I said. Inside the small briefing room, the district attorney, a woman named Eleanor Hart, stood waiting. Her expression was the kind you only see in people who've seen too much corruption and still believe in justice anyway. "Mrs. Williams," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "your husband would be proud." I nodded, unable to speak. She turned to her team. "We're ready to go live in 10 minutes. You'll make a brief statement, then we'll play the audio. After that, the evidence goes public." "Public," David repeated. "Yes," Hart said, "online. Every news outlet in the state has the files. If Evans tries to bury it, he'll only dig deeper." As they set up, I glanced at the small monitor showing the feed outside. Reporters lined the steps, cameras pointed at the doors waiting. For years, Mark had lived as the respectable businessman, the philanthropist, the friend of city officials. Now every lie he'd told was seconds from crumbling. When they finally called my name, I stepped up to the podium. The lights were blinding the room, full of murmurs and clicking shutters. "My name is Anna Williams." I began my voice steady but quiet. 5 years ago, my husband Daniel Williams was declared the cause of a fatal crash. It was ruled an accident, but it wasn't. I paused, letting the silence settle. My husband took the blame to protect a man he trusted, a man who betrayed him, forged reports, and built his fortune on that lie. That man's name is Mark Evans. The room rippled with whispers. Flashbulbs flared. I lifted the recorder, the same one I'd carried like a secret heartbeat. "Last night, Mr. Evans met with me privately. He admitted to causing the crash and to manipulating my family for years. You're about to hear his own words." Henry pressed a button on the console, and the sound filled the room. Mark's voice came through clear, confident, unguarded. "Daniel made his choice. He was weak. He thought if he took the blame, he'd save his family. You want someone to blame, blame him." Then my voice followed, calm and cold. "He trusted you." And his final words, dripping with arrogance. And that was his mistake. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the speakers. When the recording ended, a wave of murmuring broke out. Reporters whispering, phones buzzing, someone gasping. The DA stepped forward. This recording, combined with newly uncovered evidence from Mrs. Williams and Detective Henry Cole, proves the falsification of police records, corporate fraud, and obstruction of justice. A warrant has been issued for Mark Evans's arrest. I barely heard the applause. My knees felt weak, my throat tight. Somewhere behind me, David reached out and steadied me with a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Mom," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "Your father did." When we stepped outside, the air exploded with noise. Reporters shouting questions, camera flashes bursting like fireworks. Henry guided us through the crowd, shielding me from the chaos. I caught fragments of voices. Breaking news, Avoncorp CEO accused 5-year cover-up, Daniel Williams, exonerated. The words didn't feel real until I saw it on the giant screen across the street. Local business tycoon, exposed in fatal cover-up. Underneath my husband's photo, appeared smiling, alive again in a way he hadn't been in years. My breath caught. "He's free," I whispered. David looked at the screen, his eyes glistening. "So are you." Just then, Henry's phone rang. He stepped aside to answer, listening intently. When he came back, his face was grim. "Mark's on the move. He tried to leave town 15 minutes ago, but state police picked him up at the airport. He's in custody." I exhaled my body, finally releasing tension I'd carried for half a decade. "Then it's over." Henry gave a small nod. "For him, maybe. For you, it's a new beginning." The rest of the day blurred into noise. Interviews, signatures, endless questions. By the time evening came, the story had gone national. Mark's face was on every news channel, the confession replayed like a mantra of justice, long overdue. His empire collapsed in hours, board members resigning partners, cutting ties, accounts frozen. But amidst the chaos, one headline made me stop. "Daniel Williams posthumously cleared. Family inherits unclaimed trust, worth $320,000. I read it twice. Heart-hammering. Henry explained it later. Apparently, Daniel had an old life insurance policy tied to his name that had never been claimed because of the falsified report. Once the conviction was cleared, the funds were automatically transferred to his next of kin. When I told David, he just stared at me, stunned. He planned for this. "Yes," I said. "Even in death, he made sure we'd be safe." David sank into a chair, rubbing his face. "I don't deserve any of it." "You do," I said. "Because your father believed you could be better than him and better than the man who tried to destroy us." He looked up, eyes red. I was so blind, Mom. Now you see, I said gently, that's enough. That night, as I sat alone in the living room, the television playing softly in the background, I heard the newscaster say it again. Mark Evans taken into federal custody, facing charges of vehicular manslaughter, fraud, and conspiracy. Outside, the world was quiet. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I walked to the window and looked up at the dark sky. "It's done, Daniel," I whispered. "The truth's out." The streetlight flickered against the rain-soaked glass, and for a moment I almost swore I could hear the faint rumble of a motorcycle in the distance, the sound of him riding home one last time. By the next morning, the entire town knew. It was impossible not to. Daniel's name was everywhere on morning shows and newspapers, on radio broadcasts. The man who died protecting the truth, they called him. I sat by the window, watching neighbors pause at the end of our driveway, whispering some leaving flowers by the gate. For years, they'd looked at me with polite pity, as if Daniel's death had been a stain we could never wash away. Now they looked at us with something new respect. David came downstairs holding his phone. Mommy said, disbelief in his voice. People are posting about Dad, stories, photos, all of it. Guys from the old garage he worked at, even the mayor. They're saying he was a hero. He was, I said quietly. He just didn't live long enough to see anyone believe it. The doorbell rang. Standing there was Tom the mechanic, his cap in his hands and his eyes bright with emotion. "Mrs. Williams," he said, "I just wanted to say what you did took guts. I watched that broadcast 3 times last night. Daniel would be damn proud." I smiled, feeling the weight in my chest ease a little. He'd probably say I made too much noise. Tom chuckled. "Well, sometimes you've got to make noise for people to hear you." As he turned to leave, he added, "You know, the garage guys are talking about putting up a plaque for him. The man who stood for truth. That sound okay to you?" My throat tightened. "That sounds perfect." By afternoon, the house was crowded, reporters outside the gate, neighbors dropping off casseroles like it was a second funeral, only this time filled with gratitude instead of grief. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years came by to say they were sorry for ever doubting us. Then just before sunset, Claire arrived. She stood on the porch raincoat, clinging to her shoulders, eyes swollen from crying. I almost didn't open the door, but something in her face, a kind of hollow remorse, made me step aside. She didn't try to come in right away. I saw the news, she said softly. "I know you probably don't want to see me." "You're right," I said. "I was wrong," she said quickly. "About everything. Mark, he told me he'd ruin David if I didn't help him. I thought I was protecting us, but I just helped destroy more." I looked at her for a long moment. "You stood by while he almost took our home. You lied to my face." Tears welled up again. "I know, and I'll live with that, but please tell David I never meant to hurt him." I hesitated. There was a time when I would have wanted her to suffer to feel even a fraction of what we'd felt. But revenge, I realized, was just another cage. Daniel hadn't wanted that. "Claire," I said, "finally, you should tell him yourself. He's inside." She blinked in surprise. "You'd let me." "I'm not doing it for you," I said. "I'm doing it for him. He deserves closure." She nodded, wiping her eyes, and stepped inside. I stayed on the porch, listening as muffled voices drifted from the living room. David's quiet, broken anger, and silence, then the sound of 2 people crying. When she left, she looked lighter, like she'd finally exhaled after years of holding her breath. As the sky turned orange over Oakwood Drive, Henry pulled up to the house. He got out, holding a small box. "I figured this belongs here," he said. Inside was Daniel's old badge from his volunteer safety unit, polished clean. The department asked me to return it personally. They're reopening his commendation record. I held the badge in my palm, its cool metal catching the last of the sun. He always said he didn't need recognition. Henry smiled. Maybe not, but sometimes justice needs an audience. That night, as the town quieted and the news cycle rolled on, I sat on the porch with David. The air smelled of wet grass and gasoline, the scent of old life and new beginnings. Down the street, someone had tied a ribbon to a lamppost for Daniel Williams, the man who never stopped protecting. David stared at it for a while, then said, "You think he'd forgive me for selling the bike, for not believing you?" I placed a hand over his. He already did, the day he decided to protect you. The porch light buzzed above us, casting a warm glow over the quiet yard. For the first time, there was peace. Not perfect, not easy, but real. The kind that doesn't come from forgetting, but from finally being seen. And as the night settled in, I whispered to the dark, "The truth's out, Daniel. The fire's spreading, but this time it's light, not destruction." The world moves fast when the truth finally catches fire. Within a week, Mark Evans's empire was dust. His company's name vanished from the glass building downtown, replaced overnight by a for-lease sign. The news showed him being escorted from court in handcuffs, his once perfect suit crumpled, his arrogance gone. For the first time in 5 years, I watched him in silence and didn't feel rage. I just felt done. He was charged with vehicular manslaughter, forgery, and corporate fraud, 3 crimes that, when read together, sounded almost too neat for what he'd actually done. But I didn't need poetic justice. I just needed him to face the kind that counted. The judge denied bail. The cameras captured everything: the flashbulbs, the shouting reporters, the quick stunned glance Mark gave when he saw me in the back of the courtroom. He opened his mouth like he wanted to speak, but I just looked away. There was nothing left to say. Claire testified 2 days later. She admitted everything: how Mark had coerced her, how she'd sent him updates about me, how she'd been too afraid to stop. The DA offered her a deal for cooperation. When she walked out of the courthouse, reporters shouted her name, but she didn't answer. David stood outside waiting for her, not as a husband, not even as a friend, just as someone who once shared the same damage. He told me later he forgave her not because she deserved it, but because he didn't want to carry the hate anymore. I understood that. Hate is heavy. It takes everything with it if you let it. Evan Corp collapsed under investigation. The employees lost their jobs, the board resigned, and the state seized assets worth millions. But one thing survived: a foundation Daniel had once helped start, buried under layers of false ownership. The DA's team traced its funding back to Daniel's original investment, meaning it legally belonged to his estate. Henry called me one evening, excitement in his voice. "It's poetic," he said. "His money's going to fund road safety scholarships in his name." When I heard that, I cried for the first time since the trial began. Not out of pain this time, but because it felt like Daniel had finally come full circle. The man they blamed for an accident was now helping prevent them. The town changed too. People who used to cross the street when they saw me started waving again. The mayor held a small ceremony in front of City Hall. They unveiled a bronze plaque in honor of Daniel Williams, for integrity kept when silence was easier. I stood beside David, the late afternoon sun warm on our faces. Henry was there too, standing a few steps away, smiling quietly. The crowd clapped, the wind caught the flag above us, and for a moment the world didn't feel cruel. It just felt still. After the ceremony, David and I went home. The reporters were gone. The house quiet again. In the kitchen, the old coffee mug Daniel used sat on the shelf where I'd left it. I took it down, washed it carefully, and finally placed it away. That night, David packed his things. He was moving out, starting fresh. A new apartment, a new job. "I don't deserve another chance," he said, "but I want to earn one." "You will," I told him. "Your father would want that." He smiled faintly. "You know, I keep thinking about him. Not the way he died, but the way he lived. The way he worked on that bike for years just to get it perfect." "That's what justice is," I said. "It's not a clean win. It's work, constant work." After he left, the silence returned, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like space, room to breathe, room to heal. Weeks later, Henry came by with news. "Sentencing's next month," he said. "Evans took a plea deal. 15 years, no parole." I nodded. "He'll still wake up every morning and know what he did." Henry looked at me. "You okay?" "Yes," I said, for the first time in a long time. He hesitated, then smiled. "You know, the guys at the precinct still talk about Daniel, said he was the only one who ever told them the truth, even when it hurt." "That's what made him Daniel," I said. When he left, I went out to the garage. The smell of oil and rain lingered faintly even after all this time. Tom had finished restoring the Triumph. The burgundy paint gleamed like blood and memory. The key hung on a hook by the door where Daniel used to keep it. I picked it up. The metal was warm from the afternoon sun. When I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roared to life, a low, steady growl that filled the space like a heartbeat. For a moment, I just stood there, eyes closed, listening. The sound wasn't grief anymore. It was freedom. Justice doesn't erase loss. It doesn't bring the dead back, but it gives the living permission to move forward. When I finally shut off the engine, the garage fell quiet again. I could almost hear Daniel's voice in the silence. Gentle teasing, "You took long enough, Anna." I smiled, touching the seat of the bike. I got here in the end, and for once, that felt like enough. The morning I decided to ride the Triumph again, the sky was the color of calm, soft blue streaked with gold. The kind of sky Daniel loved, the kind that promised nothing except clarity. David came by early, helmet in hand. "You sure about this, Mom?" he asked, smiling a little. I fastened the strap beneath my chin. "I've waited 5 years to finish the ride your father started." He didn't argue. He just nodded and climbed onto his own bike, the one he'd rebuilt from scratch after selling the Triumph. Maybe that was his way of forgiveness, piece by piece, bolt by bolt. The engines rumbled to life together, harmonizing like two voices that had been apart too long. The sound filled the morning, rolling down Oakwood Drive like thunder. Neighbors stepped outside to wave as we passed. For the first time, I didn't feel watched out of pity. I felt seen. The road out of town curved toward the open hills where Daniel and I used to ride when we were young, back when life was simple, when love felt endless and death was a rumor that belonged to other people. The wind hit my face cool and alive, carrying the scent of earth and spring. Every turn felt like coming home. David rode slightly ahead, checking on me through the mirror, but I didn't need his worry. My hands were steady on the throttle, my heart calm. The roar beneath me wasn't loss anymore, it was a heartbeat. Daniel's mine, ours. We stopped at the overlook just as the sun climbed higher, painting the valley gold. Below us the town shimmered small and far away, quiet and forgiven. David took off his helmet. "He used to bring me here when I was little," he said softly. "Told me the world looks different when you're above it." I smiled. He said the same to me. Only difference is he made me drive halfway before I realized he'd let me learn by doing it wrong. David laughed, the sound light and unbroken. For years I'd thought that laugh was gone. Hearing it now felt like resurrection. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out the small metal box, the one Daniel had hidden in the fuel tank all those years ago. The lid was dented now, the edges rusted, but it had done its job. It had carried truth through fire. I set it on the railing. "He left it to protect us," I said. "Now it's time to let it rest." David nodded. Together we watched as I opened the lid and let the wind catch the folded letter inside. The paper lifted, twirled once in the sunlight, and drifted away down the hill across the open field until it vanished into the horizon. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I whispered, "Goodbye, my love. You can rest now." David put a hand on my shoulder. "You too, Mom." We rode back in silence, the kind of silence that means peace, not distance. Every mile felt lighter, as if the ghosts had finally decided to let go. When we reached the driveway, I parked the Triumph in the garage, the same spot where the oil stains still marked the floor. But now, it didn't look like a wound. It looked like history. That evening, I sat on the porch watching the sun melt into the horizon. The world had gone quiet again, but it wasn't the same quiet as before. It was the kind that follows closure, the kind that belongs to people who've survived the storm and are still standing. I looked toward the garage, the door half open, the Triumph gleaming softly in the fading light. "We made it, Daniel," I said, "all of us." And then, almost without thinking, I turned to the sky and asked, "If the truth could cost you everything you love, would you still tell it?" The answer came not in words, but in the wind, gentle, certain, carrying the scent of motor oil and redemption. Because some truths are worth everything.